Hello, 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 happy people, unhappy people, everyone in between. What are we doing? What are we doing today? How are we? Well, Katy Perry went to space. I feel like that's pretty cool for her. Loved the Daisy meme. Great reminder that space tourism could be ours if we could get our shit together. And it's definitely going to be somebody's, whether or not we get our shit together. So I'd rather it be ours. I want to go to space. I always did, but I also don't want to like leave Earth permanently. You know, like some kind of middle ground would be super great. Um, what else is in the news besides fascism and El Salvador prisons? That's pretty much my news lately. Thinking about ICE, thinking about what your rights are. Thinking recently about how bad I would be at helping neighbors know their rights, even though I have two different pamphlets on the topic. Um, I don't even know my rights, you know. I think I saw something that was like, Trump says the homegrowns are next. And I'm like, homegrown what? Homegrown malcontents? That might be me. What does that mean? Does he mean like all the children who were born here and who get natural born citizenship? You know, does it mean me who was born here and also got natural born citizenship? Because isn't that how this country works? But yeah, the homegrowns are next. Yeah, this is very typical Holocaust behavior. I feel like this whole thing has just been mapped out before. I think that's one of the hardest parts for people when they're thinking about resisting, when they're considering what's happening. It's kind of hard to believe, right, that something is recurring to this extent. So yeah, and it feels like it's mapped out, like there's some kind of external game maker. Like this is literally the Hunger Games, and it's just impossible to do anything about. You know, that's what starts that apathy. I know I was talking about two different main like sources of apathy last time, and I couldn't even think of the second one. You know, I still haven't been able to think of it. Things have been a little intense lately, heating up in the public sphere, I guess you would say. But yeah, it hasn't been like too there hasn't been a whole lot of room for thinking anymore. So I don't really remember, but I'm sure I'll circle back to it or bring it up again at some point because it's in there somewhere. But for now, we're just gonna keep following the little blueprint I made, at least partially because it's there, and also because it's like nice to have expectations and then like meet them. So in that case, you know, we're here. Huh. We got Sleepy Cat and Ugly Crab playing in the background, number 21. Really been enjoying the workscape, super soothing to me. Hope they soothe others as well. I know a lot of the times it's just like Wi-Fi. I know a lot of the times it's just like lo-fi. And I do, you know, credit the artists on YouTube where I don't think they get as much plays. So if you want to help the artist, play the YouTube video in the background for me. And for them, it will help them get plays in a sphere they don't get as many plays, and that will be useful. Bump the lo-fi in the YouTube music crowd, which does tend to be a little bit more of a conservative crowd. You know, they need soothing, don't they? That's what I think anyway. So yeah. Anyway, try to play the Workscapes YouTubes in your background in your day. I would appreciate it. I'm gonna keep that cross pollination going between Spotify and YouTube as long as I can. I do think it's helpful as far as gaming the algorithm in a large way goes, and I would appreciate your support in that. But as we're moving on, I do want to say that there are a couple other things in the sound sphere that are getting updated. I have been adding like commentary to the kitchen playlist, the Kitchen Magic podcast, diving a little bit deeper into kitchen and kitchen magic and what that looks like. So there are going to be commentary episodes now. There will still be episodes that are purely the sound layer of a recipe video. I am going to start including the actual recipes in written format, as well as the links to the recipe blogs that I got them from initially, and you'll be able to tell like how I modified them. That's all like upcoming, but as you know, it's sort of like the grind layer of stuff, and I am obviously doing too much, so it'll happen when it's happening, probably this year at some point. And then once that's all like kind of cohesive, the process itself will just naturally, come out of it. So after I do the backlog part of things, moving forward, that's just how it's going to be in the Kitchen Magic arena. So there's that. That's been kind of exciting to see it coming together in that way. We also have core lore. I finally did a re-recording of the initial compressed stories, so you can hear them in the podcast in long format, without the sped up sound, which I know just kind of wrecks my voice. I think it's interesting. It's an interesting capture to hear me read it specifically, and how it relates to like my life and where I'm at. I know my life and where I'm at is kind of cringe for plenty of people, and I get that. Like I was listening to the protests videos the other day because I was re-recording a lot of the protest noises, and I could hear my own voice, and I sounded so fucking bored and like so not a believer, right? Like I had this sound to my voice that was just like, yeah, Palestine will totally be free. And it sounds like almost sarcastic and dismissive, and I wasn't trying to come off that way. Part of it was I was just fucking tired, and it was like the millionth protest I'd been to, and I kind of just had, no more energy for it. And part of it was just being like genuinely emotionally beaten down by the type of opposition I completely understand that we face. And I do feel that I have a more realistic understanding of that than most people, most protesters, despite how passionate they are. And that's just like totally rude of me, but it's one reason that I go to protest, but I'm such a lone wolf about it. I have a hard time like joining up in the groups because I'm just like, I literally just don't think you understand how difficult this is going to be. Like and it's hard too to not to want to support civil disobedience in any form, because it's like seriously so fucking powerful when people protest, when they get together, when they go off. It's so powerful. It really it has such an impact on the average person who didn't go to the protest, right? Like the people watching it on TV. It's huge, and it's huge around the world. Like it has such a huge behind closed door impact that I never want to take away from it. But I also just cannot get as excited as the people yelling, because I'm just I don't think it's that simple smalls or whatever. And I recognize that also as a jaded thing, and that I need to grow in that sense, because it would be a lot easier if more people just were as passionate about justice and liberation as these people are. And that I feel like I also am. I just feel like I do it in a cool, edgy way that is super woke to the actual realities of the challenges that we face and shit. Yeah, you can hear me being sarcastic at myself, because I can't take myself seriously when I feel that way, but I also cannot bring passion to my voice when I don't feel it. So I was I was re-listening to that, and I was like, dang. I'm not the best, I don't want to say self-advocate, but I'm not the best face of a revolution or voice, and I'm literally not trying to be. I'm trying to be a cheerleader of the people who are, and also the people who are doing a lot of the work in the background, who are just invisible. I want them to know that I see them, and that I understand that they're there, and working, and that this is not just a one You know, this isn't going to end because somebody does a march or a protest. There's like way more that goes into it, and there are a lot of people just saving their energy for that part of the labor. And that's one thing that just like really bothers me when it comes to solidarity movements in general, is like most people do not acknowledge during the movement that there are other groups who are not their group who are going to be doing just as much labor in a completely different direction. And that lack of acknowledgement is what keeps solidarity networks from forming, like, or being more strong. And so that is like one of the things that drives me crazy, and another reason I can't get too impassioned. But also, and this is like, now I'm just making excuses, but like I was listening to these protests and listening to my own voice, and how like just fucking exhausted I sounded, and how like deeply unbelieving I sounded, just like, yeah, from the river to the sea, Palestine will totally be free. You know, and just like not mocking either. I'm making it sound mocking now in the retelling, but it wasn't even mocking. It was just like deadpan, you know, and compared to the voices around me, it was very like, that's what made it sound mocking. But listening to it again later, I don't know, like personally, I was like, honestly, this kind of just illuminates how long-standing this problem is, to hear like a mediocre white lady like barely chanting along. Honestly, like, taking my own ego out of it for a minute, like that's somewhat illuminating of like how long this struggle has been going on, and how like exhausting it is. And I think, at least to me, that like little mini, like, oh, this sort of highlights, you know, the issue and the length of the problem, and the like larger issues we face. That kind of created a mental like association for me with like why it seems like white women are always doing nothing, or like they're having their little tea talks, they're doing their little gossipy thing, but they're not actually like doing anything useful. I'm like, I think that is the useful part. I think they're just so used to being oppressed. Like, it's been so fucking long, the history of it, and the like intimacy with the oppressor too, right? Because like the oppressor identity is white, male, rich, Christian. um yeah yeah, just like these different forms of privilege. And while the like race, quote quote, of whiteness has changed in definition, especially in American, you know, the last 200 years of American history, it's changed in definition over time. And like, we're not really getting at the larger British colonial like Western uh, colonization in the global theater. We're not like even really getting into that necessarily, but like white women, right? Like the gender opposite of these privileged folk are very intimate with the oppressor, and also like receive plenty of the same privileges as the oppressor. And so they have this, first of all, like deeply ambiguously coded relationship with oppressor identities. But they also have like their resistance movements tend to be much more like subterfugian in nature, right? Like they're underground so much more. And so like you're not gonna see the ways that your solidarity groups, or like your hoped for solidarity groups, are necessarily working towards liberation. And you have to just kind of assume it's there. But at the same time, like, with how long this has been going on, and the, like I said, like the level of intimacy with the oppressor that white women have, it's also like so easy to just be fucking pissed at them, at me specifically, and to just be like, you should be doing more. Like, poisonous bitter rage is such a valid feeling. You know, and that's like, honestly, to me, I'm just like, that makes sense. Like, that's why we have you know, like some pretty intense race play kink dynamics in the kink and leather community, and in porn. And I'm just like, okay, no, I can't make everything about sex, although I totally could. But it's just an easy one. And I think like when you look at the data too, it makes it easier to like get a broader view of like us as people, and what we value, and like the types of things that we struggle with. You know, in along with this conversation, for example, the 2024 statistics from Pornhub show like a significant preference towards like ebony as a porn category for most of the African continent and most of the United States of America. And so that's like a really interesting thing since like to me it just shows like obviously we're still working through the generational trauma that was slavery in its rawest Amistad kind of format compared to like where it's at now, and how the Gulf, how the islands in the Gulf are still severely impacted and like barely having changed from that quality of life in from that time period, right? And so like these things are highly interconnected, they're highly interdependent. And so when I'm thinking about all these things, I'm thinking about like, oh, who's really to blame? How do we actually solve this? And to try to talk about it in a meaningful, coherent way. It's fucking difficult, and I know that you know that, but it's I do sound fatigued sometimes, and I do sound jaded, and I also do not mean to like undermine anybody's solidarity work or anybody's activism or anyone's liberation movements. You gotta believe that what you're doing is the most right for you and your role and like your intersectional identities and all these different parts of who you are as a person. Like it's not your job to explain racism to people. And it's not your job, like none of this is actually your job. But if you're volunteering into something, you have to really have faith that your methods are the one that's right for you. And not trying to undermine anybody or make them feel like their work is less important. So I hope I haven't come across like that. Okay, so intro done for now. Let's talk about what we're talking about in this next, okay, no, you're good. In this next, like, triptych, thing of three, ugh. God. Oh yeah, so we're doing nouns. We just did people and places. And now we're doing things. And the first one of things is the way that value shifts across industries and their implications and consequences. So this is really interesting. And this really gets into like the intersectional problems, intersectional solutionism approach, and just like as far as what's going on here and what we can do about it. Because you really can see human value systems changing through observing industry and economy. And I know that like most people who are deeply engaged in liberation practices have a strong aversion to economy. And I know it's been frustrating to hear me talk about economy so much because like the dollar is the devil, right? Like we hate this monopoly exchange of like fake cotton bills for human blood. It's fucking gross. We all hate that. Nobody likes that. I just want to point that out. No one is stoked about that in its most literal, rawest form. It's just that we also like stuff, and we also like resources, and we also like the sense of security. We also like to feel like we're progressing. We like technology. We like new toys. We like new things, and we're not going to stop liking that. No matter like what utopian Gaiist future you have hung your heart on. And it can certainly get more simple. We can become more fiscally conservative, resource conservative, in the sense that we can mass produce, recycled 3D printed objects. For most things, we don't need this much unique, objects like physical material. It's just absurd, actually. And then we can also have like a handcraft economy, much like the early 2000 hipster movement, but like even more so, way more than that. And that sort of combination that like let's value these things differently with how we spend our money, how we participate in trade, how we participate in the economy. That is how we're going to shift like our larger societal norms. And so just watching human values shift across these industries and what those implications mean and like what their consequences are, economy can tell you anything you want to know about like what human beings are valuing and what the society like cares about, or can't live without, or a whole lot of other things. One like super easy example is like the 50s kitchen appliance movement. Holy moly, Batman. Just like think about the fridge. Like the evolution of the fridge freezer combo is an entire story about the way we have shaped our food relationships and our food habits, as our values have shifted and as our needs have changed. A huge aspect of that, of course, is going to go right back to labor and industry and warfare, which goes right back to resource hoarding and militarism. And yeah, protecting wealthy landholders. That is the entire nature of this system. It is how the system operates. So when we're thinking about that time period, you can also think about women entering the workforce, the labor force, and this need for kind of automating or optimizing kitchen practices, because women used to just live in the kitchen, right? It's a Yeah, I mean the laundry too. Laundry machines, man, huge deal. Huge deal. Something happened, right? Like women entered the workforce and it changed the shape of our economy in a positive way. It like made we were making way more money in like a national gross sense. Gross as in like gross versus net sense. Um and back at home, like we got all these cool new gadgets to like help that happen, help that work. It still didn't work well enough when it comes to like emotional labor and the distribution of like household management. Although that is changing, it's just changing more slowly. But the automation of some of the longest form practices in the household was a huge reason why we were able to I don't want to say capitalize on that labor force increase as an opportunity, but that's essentially what happened. Because yeah, this is capitalism, and I mean that's like how it works. But this value shifting across industries and their implications, consequences, that's a very like that whole thing I described going on in the 50s is a very obvious like collective agreement in the way that we valued labor, time, energy, and money, and like what we wanted out of our home life, right? Because at the end of the day, this comes back to home life. And for many women during that time, it meant an escape from deeply abusive situations or an incredible amount of boredom. When I was practicing for this project, because that's kind of now how I'm thinking about it in retrospect. I know I like to rewrite history a little bit because I don't think I was practicing for this project so much as I was like just trying to become a certain type of person. But when I was practicing for this project, a lot of what I did was return to like 50s housewife behaviors when it came to like washing clothes in the sink and like hanging them up to dry, or not mopping but like washing things, like washing the floor with rags, and other things with rags, just to see like, automation cut a lot of corners for us initially, but now we're cutting so many more corners because of it. And so I'm like, what things can we like go back to long form elaborating in a positive way that like is helpful, right? Because that kind of work gives you some mental headspace for like thinking and doing stuff. And there's so much about our culture that like actively devalues taking time to think or taking space for it. So what is going on there? And trying to tease out what was happening, like I said in the last episode, I'm like violently feminist in the sense that a lot of what motivates me is this like just deep anger towards being societally devalued as being less than men. It's a very dehumanizing social structure to have in place, and as much as it is changing, as much as it has been changing, there are plenty aspects where the default assumption is that my opinion's less valued, that my humanity is less important, that it's less real, that I'm less real as a person, and it's it's not going to go away until it goes away everywhere, because if I know, without a doubt that there are child marriages and female circumcision and, these like really, really horrific practices that relate to the ownership of the bodies of women, not to mention my legal rights to contraceptive or abortion being completely withheld from me. These things are right here at home too. Yeah. Thank you, California, for that not being the case here. But like, it's a chancy thing. The state versus federal relationship is a dicey one sometimes. So it's always a shifting concern. And the more you hear about the issues that women around the world face, the harder it becomes to see yourself as a fully fledged human being, separate and autonomous from any man or men in a general sense, right? It's so easy to continue thinking of your identity as a woman as being an addendum to another person's identity as a man. So this particular paradigm of being the distaff can be super beneficial. I've built a lot of my own understanding of self, or my own understanding in the world, through distaff lenses, left-handedness, being another one, but it's still, because I am actually left-handed, so that's kind of useful, but it's still like the default from the other, right? You are the not that, you are the other one, and to be othered in such a way as a default state of your existence, especially from birth, and having it reiterated legally, socially, and in many, many other ways, culturally, is obviously it's dehumanizing. It's fucking exhausting. And for Black women, Indigenous women, queer women, it just becomes worse, this intersectional aspect to things. Oh yeah, poor women too, disabled women, neurodivergent women. This is a struggle. So yeah, a lot of my passionate advocacy towards liberation is built through this lens. It's actually something that I'm struggling with now, as I'm identifying more as non-binary, more as gender fluid, although I do strongly still feel myself like in-housed in the feminine aspect much of the time, as like a safe space and an identity origin point. It's still like not where I spend a lot of my time. A lot of the time I spend online, which means I'm actively refuting a male coded system in real time all the time, which honestly makes me feel mechanistic. I've mentioned agender and cyborgism, but when I'm not swinging between those extremes, I also just sort of feel like, human creature is like so much easier to describe me. I feel very anti-gender, gender anarchist, gender like, why do we even have this shit in the first place? It's so frustrating and annoying, and I'm constantly trying to deal with that too. So I'm a mess, and like I'm up in the air, but yeah, where are we going? Value shifting across norms, labor markets, economy, industries, and their implications and consequences. Do I want to get into the makeup industry? No, I don't. I don't even remember where I was going. I just like went off about how frustrated I am with my gender identity and how fucking not my problem it should be, right? Like the issue, like the reason I'm having dysphoria and focusing more on my dysphoria than my euphoria is literally because society is wrong. And that's so frustrating. That's so annoying. And I know that that's like, that entire perspective is what makes the conservatives get all pissy about snowflakes. But literally, oh yeah, and like fourth ribbon lovers, or like trophy givers, the people who get field day ribbons for no reason, just for participate. Oh yeah, the participation trophy haters. Those people are like, society is the thing that's wrong. I'm like, society is the thing that's wrong. If society was more fluid about gender, or at least just valued it less in their like evaluation of human beings as like whether or not they have value in the first place or are inherently like real in the first place, this wouldn't be a fucking problem. This wouldn't be a problem for anybody. This wouldn't be a problem for any of us. So yeah, it is society's fucking problem. I am pissed at the fact that we can't culturally just get over the fact that like people are going to look different, and what you assume their gender is or their gender identity is based on how they look is not necessarily going to be the case. So can we all just like default to not being presumptuous? But like, no, not even I can do that. So, you know, it is hard. It's a struggle, and I am struggling with it too. I didn't mean to turn this talk into that talk, but you know, sometimes these things really, they happen. But you know, how does this all relate to like things and buying stuff and the way we can see our values changing across industries? I mean, like if you really look at industry and like what is selling right now, it's kind of hot. Like this, there's like a huge and fast cultural shift in what we find meaning in. And I might be in my little California bubble, which is totally accurate. We are the 5th largest economy in the world. So it's actually kind of a big bubble in when we talk about economy and we talk about setting trends or cultural norms or the values. But in my giant bubble of big economy state, some of the value changes that I see is like a focus on meaning. Like people are intentionally shifting to thrifting or secondhanding, upcycling, recycling. A lot of ethics are being placed in purchasing, more so than I think I've ever seen. And that's really encouraging to me. And I know that I talk about the California practices and bubble a lot, and maybe it gets exhausting. But I can see it in other places too, right? Like I can see the ways that, I mean, I was traveling this last year across the country, and people are purchasing either experiences with each other or they're purchasing things that demonstrate their values surrounding those experiences, or things they consider absolutely necessary, which is interesting. Like, is that necessary? Do you really, you know, like, we're all having a lot more intense feelings about these questions. And I think that's great. I think it's good. I think it also makes it really easy to make the wrong choice, like to either buy too much or too little of what you actually need or what you actually want, and then to just be in this constant state of never feeling satisfied, but also feeling like you're already like doing too much of that impulsive purchasing. What is it called when you satisfy the instant gratification? Too much instant gratification shopping and yet never feeling satisfied, and but like also feeling like you need it or whatever, and just like being in that state. That's one thing I'm seeing a lot of people in. And I would like to just point out that this is happening to you because you're not being given like actual time to actually think about it. Either you're not actually giving yourself that space and time, or more likely your like various human creature needs and the way that you have to go to work every day is not giving you time to like really think about it. So I would just like recommend slowing down and thinking like, I want to say more slowly, but like just giving yourself that space and trusting yourself to take it and trusting yourself to like actually find an answer. Because I think that's part of the problem too, is like it's so exhausting to even take space for that kind of self-conversation and to feel that it was so unproductive, like this, you know, like this went nowhere. Because that often happens, and it can be the most just like demoralizing experience to take the space and the time and to feel like you got less far than you had, you know, when you were initially trying to think about it. or less far than you were when you started, that's so demoralizing. You're like, wow, I took the time to actually try to think about this and I still got nothing. But that's pretty much what happens the very first time you take the time to think about something that you've been putting off thinking about. I just want to point that out because I know everybody knows this, but you forget. I forget. Everybody forgets that that's how it goes. Like, we're such goldfish-brained creatures a lot of the time. Um, that's just, that's the way it be. Um, so give yourself a break, give yourself the benefit of the doubt, and really do try to think about like start larger than yourself, first of all, because when you start thinking about your purchasing habits from a you perspective, it kind of takes up too much emotive space. Most people are lacking emotive space, right? Like, you're already struggling in a variety of relationships to have enough emotional bandwidth for whatever it is, that applying emotional, moral, ethical considerations to your purchasing habits, probably also helped along by the panic and the fear and the like sure knowledge that you're misspending your money and like you don't have enough of it in the first place. So that makes you feel like you're bad. So like all of that stuff, not helpful, and going to unpack it, very difficult. So kind of go more broad. This is my suggestion, but like think about your like affinity. No, don't think about your affinity group. Think about your state. Yeah. Yeah, think about your state. I want like Wikipedia, like look up what your state spends the most money on as a government. And think about the value system that it's reflecting. That should give you, hopefully, a good feeling about yourself, right? Because that's your tax money. That is your money being spent in theory along with your vote, like alongside your vote, or alongside your people, the people who live with you. And if you're opposed to the way that your people are living, that makes it a little bit harder, but it also illuminates where your ethics are and makes you feel better. So no matter what, take a look at how your state is spending its money, the taxpayer dollar. Don't look at the federal one, it's really bad right now, but look at your state. And then from there, think about like, think about how much of your personal purchasing behaviors align with your states, positively or negatively, like things that make you feel good about it, things that make you feel bad about it. Okay, so like mine is easy to illuminate. I just started talking about it in the kitchen magic episode. I'll bring it up over here. But like my biggest purchasing issue as far as like managing my own personal money is eating out. Like I will totally eat out from loneliness. I'll eat out just from being tired of cooking for myself. I'll eat out because I fucking love fried food. It's, and those are three different really strong motivators for eating out. So it's basically a constant battle for me to eat in, which I usually win. I'm pretty stoked that like overall I have come much further in winning that war more often than I lose it, or that battle. It's a war. It's a lifelong war. But it's a battle, that I win more often than I lose, and I'm pretty stoked that it's been that way for, some 5, 6 years now. As far as like improving that relationship, I am working on it. I want to get down to like once a month eating out, but it just that seems very impractical to me because then I would have to choose. I would have to choose like cuisine style, and that's just so hard. But that's a work in progress, and at this point I'm not eating out at all because I just literally can't afford it. And that'll help too. Basically creating like a dry spell or a desert um, in which I can kind of recalibrate is hopefully going to be helpful for me in that. Um, but yeah, in comparison to like my state's food practices, right? Like their legislation surrounding food, or the farm to table aspect of it all. So their legislation surrounding farmers, their legislation surrounding food distribution, grocery stores, warning labels, all of that. Restaurants, health and safety, all of those things are my tax dollars at work. I'm grateful, I remember I had like this really vivid growing moment when it came to that particular relationship when it was like 2016, I think, and California enforced the 10-cent for plastic bag rule at grocery stores. Like if you forget a reusable bag, they will charge you 10 cents for the plastic ones. And the plastic bags had to be kind of more reinforced in the sense that they needed to be like reusable in the future so that you could purchase the bag for 10 cents, but then you could like bring it back and use it again, in theory. That way it wasn't like just a total poverty tax sort of situation, which can happen. So it was a really thoughtful rule to try to implement some recycling behaviors and like reduce waste. And I thought it was super cool on paper, but I was very not ready to like change my behaviors. And I owned so many reusable bags that I just never had. Like they were never in my car, they were never something I remembered to bring with me. So this was like a 3-year struggle for me to just get used to bringing the reusable bag to the store. And I'm not alone. Like a lot of Californians struggled with this law and probably felt bad about ourselves. I know I felt bad about myself that I couldn't just like get it together and be a better, waste reducer essentially. Because like, oh my God, in a closed system like Earth, and like having the literacy and the awareness to understand that we are, actively destroying our environment, which doesn't take a whole lot of literacy, by the way. It's very obvious that we're destroying our environment. Just look at any country and the waste that they produce and where it goes, and we know that, right? Like it's just so glaringly obvious. We just have to look at our trash, but we really suck at looking at trash. And some of us are getting better at that. Like I feel like we're adapting. The reuse and recycle and upcycle communities have been like huge spearheading campaigns on this particular topic. Just completely changing the vibe, right? Changing the taboo surrounding being a refuse rustler, if you will, or somebody who, paws through the garbage of others. Yeah, there's like a lot of street urchin coding in that. There's a lot of poverty coding in that. There's a lot of social taboo against it. And so it's been like a shameful practice. It's been shameful to be a garbage man. It's been shameful to deal with waste in any sense, despite how positive the overall societal impact is on us. We still struggle with like, ooh, you handle poop? Ucky. Or whatever it is, right? Like not poop necessarily, but a lot of times there is poop in the trash bag, right? There's like baby diapers in plenty of trash although some parents are like doing only diaper bags, which is nice. But my point is. We're getting we're getting a lot more sophisticated on this particular topic, and it's great to see. But at the individual level, it's still like a challenge to overcome it in real time. These cycles take you these things which usually take like generations to break or change. We're managing to change them in an individual's lifespan. So this is like a massive upgrade for humanity that we aren't really acknowledging is happening, and that we keep like self-flagellating over. But I really want to point out that like we're doing so much more quickly than we ever have. And we deserve to give ourselves like a little bit of a break, the benefit of the doubt, the like bigger perspective, keeping things in perspective sort of thing when we're talking about these topics, when we're struggling with them by ourselves. I know like I still get so much emotional like riz off of using my reusable bag. It's been like 3 years now that I almost never do I need to ask for a bag. And honestly, when I do, I don't think they even charge me half the time, like they're pretty lenient about it because the idea was to change practices and most people engaged with it from a collective perspective of like, yeah, we are all doing this because Californians are pretty used to like seeing their tax dollars work for them as a society, and like grudgingly or not grudgingly, excitedly or unexcitedly just sort of changing, and that's cool. But it's been a concentrated collective effort of being like, if my cashiers initially hadn't been understanding and thoughtful about my struggles, like watching me struggle to bring in a reusable bag, I probably would have like folded under the pressure I was giving myself about it and just like committed to being worse instead, right? Like just deciding like, fuck it, I'm paying for 10 cents all the time, I guess, brr. And then just like bitching or like even going so far as to like politically advocate for removing that law in general. And that's generally what happens when you see reverse progress or reverting. Skill regression, I guess, is what it really is. But like this regression in active participation in social contracts that clearly benefit your society or the community you live in, that sort of thing tends to happen because somebody's butthurt, and enough people got butthurt, and enough people weren't understanding towards the butthurt people or compassionate enough towards the butthurt people that the butthurt people banded together and decided to make some fucking noise and a serious problem for others. And when I say people weren't understanding enough of those people, I don't mean we need to be tolerant of intolerance because that's way too far in the other direction. But I do mean that, like, sometimes there's just no room for the progressives or the people who are, like, actively pushing towards more humane or socially conscious behaviors at a policy level. Sometimes it's really difficult for those people to be understanding if they are confined in or constrained in a incredibly oppressive system. So it depends on how much those people can breathe, whether or not there's enough compassion. And I'm pretty sure a lot of people can't breathe. So there's my 2 cents. Penny for your thoughts, although the penny has really reduced in value since they started adding aluminum, or was it tin, to the used to be 80% copper of it. I'm not a gold standard person, but I do empathize with their concerns. I'm sure I've said that before. I'm pretty much always going to say the same thing because I believe the same thing from day to day. But it's worth noting nonetheless that these shifting values do matter. I know that there's like severe concern over the disappearance of the cash economy in a larger sense because it means a restriction of people and their movement in a way that's going to involve like more tracking of people and their movement, which will, of course, make things like this El Salvador prison, let's just call it a concentration camp, the El Salvador concentration camp, more easy to perpetuate against literally anyone. So obviously we can't be having that. We need to act up, resist, and do that in whatever way makes the most sense for your energy, for your time, and for like what can you do that will have the biggest or longest impact, preferably both. Some balancing there of biggest and longest form of impact, because you need to be able to do something that's sustainable for you, and you also need to do something that makes you feel like it's useful. If you don't feel like it's useful, you're gonna get disheartened, you're not gonna like continue to stay motivated, and you aren't gonna want to continue participating in whatever activism or acts of solidarity you've been nurturing or building. So yeah, keep all that in mind. um where are we at? 50 more minutes. Okay. um Not 50 more minutes, 10 more minutes. Oh my god, we're at the 50 mark. Yeah. What else do I want to say about values and how they are reflected in our economy? I used taxes because they are an easy way to determine values, but oh yeah, let me return really quick to the food example. So, thinking about the values in my eating out behaviors does like bear witnessing or like looking at, because one of the main things that I talked about in the kitchen magic commentary, and again in like different videos of the kitchen magic video log, has been this desire to go vegan, right? Like, and it's almost, it sounds to me like, it reads to me as this like compulsive reassurance towards like what I consider to be the most like ethical of value systems when relating to food or when interacting with food. And that's like not necessarily what I consider to be the most ethical, but what I know the publicly held opinion is surrounding like the most ethically oriented um I want to say like eater types, but that's not quite right. But I think you know what I mean. Like veganism is an easy one to point to and be like, I want to be more like them, because they are so conscientious of animal cruelty, and that matters to me. They're so conscientious of it. I would argue they're the most conscientious of it. And I do think sometimes they go too far with it. I don't see a problem with dairy as long as it's ethically sourced, right? I want those animals to be happy, preferably living nearby. And that's like not always possible, but it also drops my concern over the dairy industry slightly. Like, reduces my sense of urgency. I prioritize the like meat side of things, the meat industry, as far as like, oh, how can we do some harm reduction in our animal industry practices? And the ones that do meat, or smash up chicks and include the cartilage in your McNuggies. Those ones take some precedent for me. And I know I kind of do the like ethically practice embedded in your personal lifestyle thing a little bit backwards, right? Like the idea that veganism kind of introduced to so many of us, if you hadn't been exposed to this concept before, which it was also introduced like via recycling. So yeah, I do harp on these two like an awful lot. They're just wonderfully universal things that I think we've all noticed or experienced at this point. But the thing that like veganism really introduced to people as far as like including your ethical opinions about animal cruelty in your food eating and purchasing habits was this idea that if everybody does it, if everyone changes this one thing about their behaviors, then the industry will have to change. And to me, that's a hard one because it means that if nobody does it, nothing changes. And I feel like there are other ways to change the industry and the culture, although changing your own personal habits is the most direct way and encouraging others to do the same. Although people, really hate to politicize saying vegans, I don't hate them. I think that that makes sense to like want to share that joy of like alternative food flavoring, construction, like all sorts of things. You have to learn so much about cooking to become vegan in a way that's like sustainable for you. You have to learn so much about nutrition. And I think more people really need to learn all of that stuff, which is why I just like, I really admire veganism. And I think that that's my struggle in my kitchen when I'm like constantly saying I want to be vegan. I'm like, I actually don't. I just want to be employing what like I actually believe in my kitchen in a way that's sustainable and that like is reflective of my values, and I'm not seeing that. But I guess I shouldn't say that I go about it backwards when it comes to my practices with food or my practices with recycling or waste, but I do have a bit more of a complicated view on the practice in the sense that like yes, if we all do it, it will change, but also like it's a multi-billion-dollar industry to make sure that we don't change. So holding the corporations accountable for their influence in these decision makings, like these at-home level of decision makings, is also hugely important. And that part nobody's doing, right? Like the environmentalists who are freeing animals and like, getting lifelong prison sentences are doing something, but ExxonMobil and Shell literally just asked the state of Texas to use the taxpayer money to build a seawall for them in order to combat rising sea levels. So the part where we hold corporations accountable, or we hold the moneyed interests accountable for the ways in which they're actively controlling our lives, has not really been happening. And that is going to happen at the active participation in your government level. And that's really hard when everybody's so disillusioned about that participation mattering or having any effect against money or people in power, especially because our government is particularly vulnerable to money and people in power, in the sense that we don't have any caps on like campaign contributions or anything more detailed about like the ins and outs of appropriate lobbying practices. For example, let's not like take bribes or make it like super seriously discouraged to take bribes, you know, like you're gonna have to serve time in prison or something, like actual prison for that. I don't know. Just some thoughts. Maybe lobbying just shouldn't be allowed in the first place. Maybe there should be contribution caps on that as well. Maybe no super PACs. Maybe only grassroots financial support should be allowed. But then, of course, the government, or me, imagining myself in control of the new government, would ask, then where the fuck are we getting all the money to do all that other stuff that we're doing? Because they are doing a whole lot of other shit that people take for granted and don't really appreciate. So that has to change too. And for me in my personal life, this like larger awareness of all of these things and also trying not to become apathetic or to become dispirited means that I am assuming a constant grind towards something like veganism or perfect recycling habits, and then feeling like contentedly okay about where I actually am because I understand in a realistic sense the opposition that I face. And I do think that if more people did that, we would get somewhere a lot quicker with everything. Not to say we don't need the spearheaders, right? The people who are like leading the charge on all of these ethical issues, the radicals, the free radicals especially. Yeah, the anarchists, we need them so bad because they get it and they are actively trying to think outside the box, and we don't want to live in the box. What's in the box? It's us. We're in it. We don't like it. It's the Chokey from Matilda. Like, it's not fun. This is a bad box. We're not stoked to be in the box. None of us are cats to a free home. Yeah, right? Like this, we don't like boxes, man. We just don't. Unless we feel more stable when we're inside them, which plenty of people do. Hopefully cube culture has bred that out of us at this point. Yeah, office cube culture has bred that out of us. Hopefully we all went like so crazy at a cellular level, being trapped inside cubicles all day, every day, in order to make a living, that like in a generational sense, we will never tolerate that level of like confinement again in other areas. I like to imagine that that's the case, but you know, I'm a very imaginative person who plenty of people would say is not realistic in my predictions for our future or where we are at in the present. So, as always, take me with a grain of salt, and I will see you next time.